Hi, thanks very much for joining us on the Odgers Berndsen One Question series. It is, despite the rain, it's summer 2023. My name is Jules McKean. I run the global media practice for Odgers Berndsen Executive Search out of London. I'm delighted today to be joined by Ollie Joyce from Mindshare. Hi, Ollie.
Hello.
Ollie's Mindshare's Global Chief Transformation Officer, and he works across global client teams to design future fit teams, processes, and tech solutions that accelerate growth for their clients. And he's also the exec lead of Group M's media decarbonisation workstream, and I'm sure we'll probably touch on sustainability in this, which aims to reduce emissions from media distribution by 50% by 2030, and has published work on how the industry needs to help accelerate growth and sustainable consumption. And before that, he led Mindshare's international client capabilities out of New York, and he's led global relationships and produced Cannes and Effie Award-winning work for the likes of Nike, Dyson, and Volvo. He's got an MBA from Imperial and has just finished his Cambridge University Business Sustainability Management course. So, Ollie, thank you for joining us. What better time to be looking for reasons to be cheerful than on a rainy day in the middle of July? But how can you help us with this? What should we be cheerful about?
Well, very true. And the first thing I say is your question made me laugh because it's so true. A kind of colleague said to me the other day, we're doing pretty well, but it doesn't feel like it. And I think the sort of the uncertainty and the instability is kind of affecting everyone. So I thought it was a really timely question. It's a bit like kind of practicing mindfulness, writing down your three things to be cheerful. And it's been it's a great question. So I sat down and I kind of scribbled down three things to be cheerful about. And the first one is I wrote down actually was, we first exchanged notes straight after Cannes, but 3-4 weeks later, I'm still cheerful about Cannes. We had a good Cannes, but it wasn't the winning in itself. It just felt kind of more important and more worthwhile than it has done for a few years. It was great to get affirmation for work. And so actually there is some fantastic things going on. We're kind of, I think you probably go to some trade events and it's probably pretty much the same every year, but you turn up and every year it's a completely new set of work, a completely new set of ideas. So I found that kind of inspiring. It was fantastic recognition for our people, who I think have had probably quite a as has everybody, but quite a kind of tough couple of years. So it was fantastic to see the lift it gave them. And above all, it was great. We had very senior clients, getting out of bed late at night to come down to the bar and kind of celebrate with the team. And I think there's kind of nothing that cheers you up quite as much as seeing other people share in that and really appreciate the work that's been done and the partnership. So I kind of the glow from that has carried on, and I think has kind of given us a real boost and a reminder of what we should be cheerful about.
What do you think in terms of the way that the industry's heading? Were there any changes that you could kind of pick up in the ether from Cannes in terms of one's approach to media and marketing in the next year?
Well, I think that probably kind of takes me on to the sort of the second thing that cheered me up, which was it does feel that there's a bit of a return to sanity in marketing. 20 years ago, we were told that digital would end the 50% of marketing that didn't work, and we'd have absolute certainty around everything. And then you look at what's happened, it's probably similar through like any gold rush through history, which is, a certain degree of madness kicks in. We've seen effectiveness not collapse, but certainly decline. And, I've got very vivid memories of being sat in meetings with very senior CEOs and CMOs demanding to be, they wanted the first to have 1 million friends on Facebook because it meant that we wouldn't need paid anymore. And it's not, experimentation is okay, getting things wrong is okay, but I think what was really bad about the period we've gone through is kind of the lack of debate. You were either a laggard or you were a leader, and there was kind of nothing in between. And I think it kind of mirrors what's gone on in society really, which is there's no kind of proper discourse, there's no kind of focus on the facts. And there's a great chart I saw from a Harvard professor who you think it's going to be really technical, but he explained the 4 phases of digital. He goes, the first phase is the pioneers steam in there. The second phase is everyone else becomes jealous of the pioneers, so thinks they should be doing everything as well. The third phase is that everybody steps back and goes, what are we actually doing? And the fourth phase is actually you get it right. You work out what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, what the right balance is, how to do it properly. And he called the fourth phase 5 years ago. I think he was sort of 3 or 4 years too early, but I'm genuinely looking at it now. And I'm really enthused by the conversations we're having. There's a wonderful lady at L'Oreal called Lubomira Rocher, and she just gave the most simple explanation of it, which was, she said, we've got a bunch of brand people who don't understand digital, and we had a bunch of digital people who don't understand brands. And she talks through the process of getting them in a room together. So they are both learning and developing things together.
Which is absolute crackers when you stand back, isn't it? Because it's the same customer. Yeah. It's the same customer the whole, and one wonders whether that cycle of 4 stages is going to be the same as what happens in AI, actually, interestingly, separate from the media buying and planning side of it. But it's quite interesting.
Yeah, completely. And I, in my role, in my kind of transformation role, I do look at that example, and I do, funnily enough, people say, who does the best work? If you look at the transformation that's happened in the beauty category from 20 years ago, where literally all they wanted was, first page and first double page spread and outside back cover, to the work they're doing today, there is no business that has transformed. There's no category that's transformed to the extent that they have. And I think, again, in my role, I constantly point to that example and say, look, this comes down to a long-term marketing vision that says, how can we better kind of serve consumers? Forget about the channel, forget about the technology. How do we create a better consumer experience for them? How do we create something that's more seamless? And I think if people, the process we go through is saying, where do we want to be in 2 or 3 years' time? And how do we work back to get to that outcome? And forget about the technology for a second, forget about the channels. Let's just think about the experience you need to create, and therefore what's the work plan you need to do to get there. So I'm pretty upbeat about that. I'm pretty cheerful about the balance that's emerging and the ability to debate it. I'm pretty cheerful about the focus on the consumer and the job to be done, the changes you need to make there.
And it must have changed your transformation role as well within that, mustn't it? That the kind of what people think of when they hear, as clients, the chief transformation officers coming in. That must have changed over the last couple of years as well, has it?
Yeah, I think so. Look, I mean, it's my title, but transformation is probably one of the most overused words, and you end up where everyone's transforming everything. And I think, the way we defined it is really substantial and material change in the medium to long term. So you can't transform things in 3 months. You can absolutely make improvements, but it is an equally transformation is horizontal. I think that's the example of the beauty category. They haven't just transformed digital. They haven't just transformed retail experience. They've understood how everything fits together. And that horizontality is very much the way we look at it. So I'm kind of cheerful about that. And I'm also just, within that and within the return to kind of sanity, I'm cheerful about increased respect for creativity. I'm cheerful about a return to discussions about media quality, and I'm cheerful about Twitter being down 50% in revenue, not from a vindictive perspective, but it's like, we're not going back to a situation where we do not care about the environment. We're not going back to a situation where it's okay to put brands in really poisonous environments. So I hope that sends a message to that business itself and the marketplace that we have turned a corner. We've kind of emerged from that period, and we're heading in a much more positive direction.
That's so interesting because that's almost like the S in ESG, isn't it, to a certain extent for brands? And
Yeah,
you see,
yeah.
you focused a lot yourself and learning more and more about sustainability and applying that to yourselves and to your clients. How optimistic are you around sustainability within the media industry?
Yeah, I mean, so cheerful would not be, you'd have to be demented to apply the word cheerful to
Yeah,
the environment at the moment, if I'm honest.
yeah,
But I am, if marketing is emerging from a dark period, the only kind of ray of light on sustainability is the kind of the phrase that it's darkest before the dawn, because it's grim. But what I would say, cheerful is the wrong phrase, but I think hopeful. I think it's important to be hopeful, but I also think there's substantial things going on out there. I mean, there is now huge awareness of the issue, and there is clear consumer desire to behave sustainably. So there's the stat I always quote, which is 74% of consumers saw climate change as big a threat as COVID. And this was in the height of COVID, when people were being put in temporary morgues in Central Park. So people understood that this is going to cost lives and this is going to be devastating for the planet. But only 32% of people are actively behaving sustainably. So you've got this quite enormous gap, but at least we've got the recognition. You've then got the rapidly emerging potential for clean energy and financially viable circular models. If you want to be inspired and cheered up, a couple of hours on the Ellen MacArthur Foundation website, seeing the work that's been done in that space and realizing what's possible is absolutely amazing. I think kind of hopeful about the fact we don't need everyone to believe this, but if you can kind of jump the chasm from kind of the early adopters into the majority, then actually behaviors start to change, economic models start to change. I think governments and financial institutions are not there yet, but we all know that they react to a crisis. I think unfortunately it's probably going to take a crisis, but we have seen in the US, where you've got the Anti-Inflation Act, that when politicians do act, it can kind of change whole economies. So
and actually where investment is going can as well. As some of the bigger private equities have made it absolutely mandatory to have those ESG kind of or like science-based targets in place if they're making significant investments. So I think following the money would be quite interesting in the next few years.
But I think the money needs to move. I think the stat was 80% of people in the FTSE have targets, but 5% have viable plans to get there. So wow. I can't underestimate how far we've got to go, but I do think things are changing rapidly, attitudes are changing rapidly, and I do think kind of in that environment where policies are put in place to encourage growth in this area, where finance moves to businesses to kind of make the possibilities financially viable. I do think marketing has huge ability and proven ability to kind of shift consumer behaviors, do it at scale and do it to an extent that's not been seen before. But look, I mean, it is a long way off. But it is, back to the transformation, it will be the biggest transformation of the next 10 to 20 years. If the last 10 to 20 years has been about digital, the next 10 to 20 years will be about a shift to a sustainable economy.
It's going to have to, isn't it? Otherwise there won't be one, presumably.
Yeah, no, I mean, it has, but also, one of the learnings is don't talk about the grim stuff, because ultimately people kind of go, okay, that's too much. But I think we need to talk more about, that future could be fantastic. It could be cleaner, it could be cheaper for all. It would mean resource security, much greater resource security, and that resource security creates stability. You've seen the effects of resource scarcity through the war in Ukraine and the impact that's had on inflation and short-term behaviors. All of that can be reversed, and it's not. The truth is that there's a Times sustainability, Tom Whipple at the Times. he said, if we can, if things are renewable, you can consume as much as you like. So that, because if we can get to that stage, it is potentially kind of really positive. So I'm definitely not cheerful, but I am kind of hopeful. And I do think it's, that's going to be literally the biggest kind of challenge and opportunity of the next decade.
Ollie, gosh, lots for us to contemplate, as you say, quite a big reach for some of it, but actually it feels like holistically people are looking under the bonnet of the buzzwords and actually having to get down to business all across all of those. It feels like there's been sort of sweeping, let's just automate, let's programmatic, let's digitize it, just actually going in and saying, what do you mean and how are you going to do it? And sustainability is certainly a big example of that. Thank you for giving us some reasons to be cautiously cheerful, shall we say. And let's check in and see where we are in 6 months. But Ollie, thank you very much for joining us on the One Question podcast.
Great stuff. Thanks, Julie. Love to talk.
Thanks.